My son put me on a family budget. Then the pharmacy found the payments he hid. My son put me on a family budget because he said I was overspending. That was how Daniel explained it to the pharmacist when my heart medication refill was declined at the counter. He stood beside me with his hand on my elbow, speaking in that calm, patient voice people use when they want strangers to believe an older woman is confused. "Mom gets anxious about money," he said. "I'm handling her debit card for her protection." But I was not anxious. I was frightened. I had taken the same medication every morning for 9 years. Ever since a small heart scare taught me that a person could feel perfectly fine right up until she wasn't. The prescription cost $84 after insurance. I had more than enough money in my checking account to cover it. Still, the pharmacy screen showed one hard, red word. Declined. Then Ms. Patel, the pharmacist who had known me since my husband William was alive, looked closer at my account information. She lowered her voice and asked Daniel a question that made his face change. "Mrs. Clark," she said, "have you ever received treatment at a place called Harbor Ridge Recovery Center?" Daniel answered before I could. "No," he said too quickly. "That must be some billing error." Ms. Patel did not look at him. She looked at me. And in that quiet pharmacy aisle, with my prescription waiting behind the counter and my son tightening his grip on my elbow, I learned that someone had been taking hundreds of dollars from my account every month. The money was going to a recovery center I had never visited, a recovery center that had never treated me, and my son knew exactly where every payment had gone. If you believe getting older should never mean losing control of your own life, subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments. What would you do if a family member suddenly decided they knew better than you about your own money? For most of my life, I had been careful with money without making money the center of my life. There is a difference. William used to say I could stretch $1 until it started telling me its childhood memories. He would say it while I stood at the kitchen table with coupons, a grocery list, and the small yellow pad where I wrote down every expense. Then he would kiss the top of my head and add something sweet, because he knew I was only careful so our home would always feel safe. We bought our little brick house in Willow Creek, Ohio, when I was 34 and William was 36. It had green shutters, a narrow front porch, and a maple tree in the backyard that dropped red leaves over our lawn every October. The first winter, we could feel cold air coming through the living room window frames. We could not afford replacements, so William covered them with plastic insulation film while I made soup and pretended the crinkling sound did not bother me. We built our life slowly. William worked maintenance for the county school district. I worked at the Willow Creek Public Library. First, shelving books, then helping people find jobs online, fill out forms, and apply for benefits they did not know they deserved. We paid the mortgage every month. We saved where we could. We helped our only child, Daniel, whenever we believed he truly needed us. Daniel had always been bright, charming, too, the kind of boy who could apologize so sincerely that you almost forgot what he had done. When he was 10, he broke Mrs. Donnelly's kitchen window with a baseball. He came home crying before she even called. He used his own birthday money to pay for the glass. I remember thinking William and I must have done something right. When he was 26, he borrowed money to catch up on rent after losing a job at an electronics store. He paid half of it back, then stopped mentioning the other half. When he was 34, he asked us to co-sign a truck loan for his small delivery business. The business failed within a year. William quietly paid off the remaining balance because Daniel had a baby daughter by then, and we did not want little Sophie to suffer for her father's mistakes. Each time, Daniel had a reason. Each time, I wanted to believe him. After William passed away, that hope became one of the things I had to learn to carry differently. He died 3 years before the pharmacy incident. After a fast-moving illness that still feels impossible to explain in one sentence. One spring, he was repairing a loose porch step. By Christmas, I was learning how silent a house could become. Daniel was there for me at first. He brought groceries. He fixed a cabinet hinge William had meant to repair. He drove me to the bank when I could not bring myself to sit in the driver's seat. For nearly a year, he called every Sunday. Then the calls became practical. Mom, did you pay the gas bill? Mom, are you sure you understand that insurance letter? Mom, you really should stop ordering things online. At first, I did not take offense. I was grieving. There were forms everywhere. Medical statements, property tax notices, pension letters, repair estimates. Some days I did lose track of what I had opened and what I had not. But grief is not the same as incapacity. I still read every bill. I still balanced my checking account at the end of each month. I still knew what was in my savings account, what I owed, and what I did not. Daniel never seemed interested in that distinction. The first time he mentioned a family budget, I was standing in my kitchen, slicing peaches for a cobbler. He had come by with Sophie, who was 16 then, and taller than I remembered her being. Every time I saw her, she was a sweet girl, quiet around her father, always quick to help me carry plates to the table. Daniel watched me put the peach peels into the compost bin and said, Mom, you know you don't need to buy fresh fruit every week. You're one person. I smiled. One person still has to eat. I'm serious. You're spending more than you realize. I wiped my hands on a dish towel. Daniel, I'm doing fine. He leaned against the counter. You say that, but you bought that new patio chair set last month. It was on sale. You already had chairs. The old ones were rusted through. He gave a short laugh, as if I had said something adorable rather than reasonable. That's what I mean, he said. You always have an answer. I remember the moment, because something in me went still. Not angry? Not yet. Just alert. The patio chairs had cost $120. I had saved for them over 2 months. I had not asked Daniel for permission because no adult woman should have to ask her grown son for permission to replace broken chairs on her own porch. Still, I let the conversation pass. That was my mistake. A week later, Daniel returned without Sophie. He carried a neat black folder and sat across from me at my dining room table. I made something that will help, he said. Inside the folder were printed pages with categories in bold blue letters. Groceries, personnel care, home, maintenance, medical, miscellaneous. Under each category, he had written limits. Groceries, $200 a month. Personal care, $50. Home maintenance, approval required. Medical, approval required. Miscellaneous, no spending without discussion. I read the pages twice, because I thought perhaps I had misunderstood what I was seeing. Then I looked at my son. Approval required from whom? He tried to smile. From me? Just until we get things under control. There is nothing out of control. You don't know that. Mom, that's the issue. His voice was soft. That was what made it worse. I folded the pages and placed them back in the folder. Danielle, I appreciate that you're worried about me, but I have my own budget. I have had one since before you learned how to tie your shoes. His expression changed in a way I had seen before. Not rage. Daniel rarely raised his voice when he wanted something. He became wounded instead. I'm trying to help you, he said, and I'm telling you I don't need this kind of help. He stared at the folder between us. Then he said, Fine. Do whatever you want. But don't come to me when you can't afford something important. That sentence bothered me long after he left. Not because I feared I could not afford something important. Because Daniel sounded like he expected it to happen. For the next several weeks, he became more involved in my life without ever saying he was taking control of it. He would ask to see my mail before I had opened it. He would pick up groceries and announce that he had saved me from wasting money. He complained when I took Sophie to lunch at the diner near the library. He frowned when I mentioned donating $60 to the food pantry fundraiser at church. It adds up, he said. So does kindness, I told him. He did not laugh. Then, one Tuesday morning, my debit card disappeared. I had used it the night before to pay for a prescription refill online. I kept it in a small leather card holder inside my purse, tucked in the drawer beside the telephone. The next morning, the card holder was there, but the debit card was gone. I searched the kitchen, the bedroom, my coat pockets, the laundry basket, though I knew I had not put it there. I called Daniel because he had stopped by the previous evening to replace a smoke detector battery. At first, he denied seeing it. Then he sighed. "Mum, I took it." I sat down at the kitchen table. "You took my debit card?" "I'm not stealing from you," he said sharply. "I'm trying to stop you from making impulsive purchases." "Danielle, give it back." "I will, but not until we set up something safer." "What does that mean?" "It means I hold the card, and if you need something, you call me." For a few seconds, I could not speak. The kitchen around me looked exactly as it always had. William's old clock ticking above the stove, a bowl of lemons on the counter, the white curtains moving a little from the open window. But I felt as if someone had entered my house and rearranged the walls. "You expect me to call you for permission to buy my own groceries?" I asked. "That isn't what I said." "It is exactly what you said." "You're making this emotional?" I looked down at my hands. My wedding ring was still on my left hand. I wore it every day, even though William had been gone 3 years. I turned it once around my finger, the way I did whenever I needed to remind myself to stay calm. Then I said, "Bring my card back today." He did not. Instead, he arrived that evening with a prepaid card in an envelope. "There's $150 on it," he said. "That should get you through the week." I stood in my doorway with the envelope in my hand. "Where is my debit card?" "Safe." "Safe where?" "With me." I should have called the bank that night. I know that now. But Daniel was my son. I kept thinking there had to be a misunderstanding inside the behavior. I told myself he was worried because he loved me. I told myself he had made a foolish decision and would come to his senses. I told myself every lie a mother tells when she is trying not to see the truth about her child. The prepaid card lasted 4 days. Not because I bought anything extravagant. I bought groceries, paid for gas, and picked up a birthday gift for Sophie. Then I needed to refill my heart medication. I called Daniel. He did not answer. I texted him, "Daniel, I need my debit card. The pharmacy says my prescription is ready." He responded 2 hours later. "Use the prepaid card." I wrote back, "It's nearly empty. This medication is not optional." He called me then, sounding irritated. "Mom, you have enough pills for a few days, right?" "4. "Then wait until Friday. I'll come by." "Friday is 3 days away." "You always make everything sound like an emergency." I felt my chest tighten, and not from my heart. "It is my medication." I said I'll handle it." That was the first moment I understood that Daniel did not see himself as helping me. He saw himself as having authority over me. The next morning, I drove to Willow Creek Pharmacy with the prepaid card and the loose cash I had found in my emergency envelope. I was embarrassed to be counting bills at the counter. I was embarrassed to be $78 short. I was embarrassed that embarrassment was still my first feeling, when someone else had created the problem. Ms. Patel scanned the prescription and told me the total. I handed her the prepaid card. It declined. I tried again. Declined. I added the cash. It still was not enough. Daniel walked in just as Ms. Patel was explaining that she could hold the prescription until I returned. He had apparently put a location alert on the prepaid card. I would learn that later. At the time, I only saw him come through the automatic doors, with his jaw set and his car keys in his hand. "Mom," he said, loud enough for the woman waiting behind me to hear. "Why didn't you call me?" "I did call you. You said it could wait." "No," I said. "You said it could wait." He looked at Ms. Patel and gave her a tired smile. She gets mixed up about conversations sometimes. That was the cruelest thing he had ever said to me. Not because it was loud, because he said it as though he had been waiting for an audience. Ms. Patel did not react right away. She simply asked for my date of birth and pulled up the account linked to my prescriptions. Then she frowned at her computer screen. "Mrs. Clark," she said, "there may be another issue here." Daniel stepped closer. "What kind of issue?" She glanced at him, then back at me. "Would you mind stepping into the consultation room with me?" Daniel answered before I could. "That's not necessary. I handle her finances." "Ms. Patel's voice remained polite, but it became firmer. "Mrs. Clark is my patient. I need to speak with her directly." For the first time that morning, Daniel looked uncertain. I looked at my son. Then I looked at Ms. Patel, and I followed her through the little door beside the pharmacy counter, carrying the sharp, terrible feeling that whatever she had found was bigger than a declined prescription. Ms. Patel closed the consultation room door behind us. It was a small room with a round table, 2 plastic chairs, and a faded poster about managing blood pressure. I had sat in that room before when William needed a new medication explained to him. Back then, the room had felt private. That morning, it felt like a place where my life had been placed under a bright light. Daniel remained outside the door. I could see the shape of him moving past the narrow frosted window. He was pacing. Ms. Patel sat across from me and folded her hands on the table. "Mrs. Clark," she said carefully, "I can't access your bank records. But when your prescription claim was rejected, the system flagged your insurance profile because the available payment method on file has been changed several times recently." I tried to understand what she meant. "My bank card? Your debit card information?" "Yes." There was also a notation connected to a recurring merchant name. It may be unrelated, but I wanted to ask you directly before assuming anything. She turned the computer monitor slightly toward me. On the screen was a list of payment attempts and insurance-related notes. I did not understand every line, but I understood the name that appeared 3 times. Harbor Ridge Recovery Center. The payments were not small. $275. $275. $275. Each one had been processed on the 3rd day of the month. I looked at the dates. March. April. May. That was $825. My mouth went dry. "I have never been there," I said. Ms. Patel nodded slowly. "I thought that might be the case. Why would a recovery center take money from my account?" "I don't know," she said. "But you should contact your bank directly, not through anyone else. And because your medication is medically necessary, I'm going to provide an emergency supply today while you sort this out." I could have cried from relief. Instead, he sat still, holding the edge of the table. "You can do that? For a limited number of days?" "Yes. Your doctor's office will receive a message from us." And I'll make sure they understand this is a payment access issue, not a failure to follow your treatment plan. Payment access issue. Such a clean phrase for something that felt so ugly. I thanked her, though the words sounded distant to me. Then she asked the question I had been avoiding since Daniel had taken my card. Do you feel safe going home with your son today? I looked toward the door. Daniel was my only child. I had held him through fevers. I had slept in a plastic hospital chair when he had his appendix removed at 14. I had worked extra library shifts one Christmas, so he could have the computer he wanted. I had watched him become a father. And I had believed that somewhere inside his adult mistakes was still the boy who once used his birthday money to replace a neighbor's broken window. But the man outside that door had told a stranger, I got confused. He had taken my debit card, and now there were payments leaving my account for a place I had never seen. I feel safe, I said finally. Then I corrected myself. I don't know if I feel safe with him handling anything that belongs to me. Ms. Patel gave me a small, understanding nod. That is enough reason to take this seriously. When we stepped back into the pharmacy, Daniel was standing beside the counter, pretending to read a display of cough drops. He turned around immediately. What did she say? Ms. Patel answered before I could. Mrs. Clark's prescription will be ready shortly. Daniel's eyes narrowed. And? And her medical information is private? He gave a little laugh, but there was no humor in it. I'm her son. Yes, Miss, Patel said. And she is the patient. For 1 second, Daniel looked at me as though I had betrayed him. Then he said, Mum, can we talk in the car? I did not want to go to the car. That surprised me. Daniel had driven me places before. We had sat in his car after family dinners, talking about Sophie's school or the price of groceries or the weather. But now, I imagined being inside that closed space with him, hearing his voice become soft and persuasive while he tried to explain away something I did not yet understand. No, I said. We can talk here. He looked around at the pharmacy employees and the 2 customers near the greeting cards. Mom, here is fine. His face hardened. You're embarrassing yourself. The old version of me would have lowered my voice. I would have worried about the scene. I would have tried to protect Daniel from the consequences of his own behavior, even if it cost me my peace. But I had already spent 3 days wondering whether I could afford the medication that kept my heart steady. I had already stood at that counter while my own son told a stranger. I was too confused to understand my money, so I looked at him and said, I believe you are the one who should be embarrassed. His mouth opened, then closed. For the first time in my life, I watched Daniel realize that I was not going to make things easier for him. He left without waiting for my prescription. I drove home alone. The emergency medication sat in a white pharmacy bag on the passenger seat. I kept glancing at it at red lights, as though it were proof that I had narrowly escaped something I still could not name. At home, I locked the front door behind me. Then I locked the back door. I checked every window latch, even though I had never been afraid of Daniel entering my house before. That was when grief hit me. Not grief for William, though that grief was always somewhere nearby. This was grief for the relationship I thought I had with my son. I sat at the kitchen table for nearly an hour without turning on the television or making coffee. The house was quiet, except for the clock above the stove. Tick, tick, tick. Finally, I opened the drawer beside the telephone and took out my old address book, the one with names crossed out, numbers rewritten, and little notes in William's handwriting beside people he liked. I found the number for my bank. Then I stopped. Daniel had always told me to call him before I called anyone about financial matters. He said it so often that, for a moment, my hand actually reached for my phone to ask his permission. That scared me more than the missing debit card. I dialed the bank. The woman who answered introduced herself as Carla. Her voice was young, professional, and kind. I told her my name, verified my identity, and explained that my debit card had been taken by my son without permission. There was a brief silence. Then Carla said, "Mrs. Clark, I'm going to help you secure your account. First, do you currently have your debit card in your possession?" "No." "Did you authorize another person to take and use it?" "No." "Did you give anyone your PIN?" I hesitated. Daniel had seen me use the number before. Years ago, when he drove me to the bank after William passed away. He had stood beside me at the ATM. I had covered the keypad with my hand, but I could not swear he had not seen it. "I don't know," I said. "He may know it." "Thank you for telling me. We'll cancel that card immediately and issue a replacement. I also recommend we change your online banking password and security questions. Would you like to do that now?" "Yes." She walked me through the steps, one by one. My first password attempt did not work. Then the second one did not work either. I felt heat rise in my face. "I'm sorry," I said. "I must be entering it wrong." Carla paused. "Mrs. Clark, may I ask when you last changed your password?" I didn't. "It was changed approximately 6 weeks ago." I stared at the telephone. "By whom?" "I can't identify the individual who made the change from this screen," she said, "but I can see that it was changed through the mobile application." I did not have the bank's mobile application. I still used a laptop on the desk in William's old workshop. When I needed to check my balance, I wrote passwords in a sealed envelope inside the filing cabinet because I had seen too many people at the library lose access to their accounts after trusting the wrong person with a phone. 6 weeks ago, I thought back. Daniel had visited around that time and asked whether he could organize my phone. He said my storage was full. He had sat at my kitchen counter for nearly an hour, tapping at the screen while I baked banana bread. At the time, I had been grateful. Now I felt sick. "Carla," I said, "can you tell me whether there have been unusual charges on my account? I can help you review recent transactions. Before we do, I want to make sure you are somewhere private and that nobody is directing your answers." "I'm alone in my home." "Good." Her tone changed. Not dramatic, just more deliberate. "Over the last 4 months, there have been multiple recurring electronic payments to Harbor Ridge Recovery Center. Does that business name mean anything to you?" "No." "Have you received services? Counseling, treatment, or care from that organization?" "No." "Have you authorized anyone to make payments to that organization on your behalf?" "No." I heard typing on the other end. Then Carla said, "There are 4 payments, not 3. 4. The first one had been made in February. The total was $1,100. I pressed my hand against my chest. "Can you stop them?" "I can place a stop payment request and begin a fraud review, but I need to explain something important. The charges were entered as recurring account transfers, not card purchases. That means whoever set them up likely had access to your online banking or your account and routing information." I did not need to ask who had access. "Still," I asked, "can someone do that without my permission?" "They should not." That answer, more than any other, it made the truth settle inside me. They should not. Not my son. Not anyone. Carla helped me secure the account. She placed a temporary restriction on outgoing electronic transfers. She arranged for me to visit the Willow Creek branch the next morning with identification. She told me to bring any documents connected to the charges and to avoid discussing my new account information with anyone I did not fully trust. Before we ended the call, she said, "Mrs. Clark, If someone is controlling your access to money, your card, or your account passwords, please know that we take that seriously. You do not have to handle it alone. After I hung up, I sat in the silence again. Then my phone rang. Daniel. I watched his name appear on the screen. For years, that name had meant my son calling. A familiar voice. A request for advice. A picture of Sophie's school project. A grocery question. An apology. Now it meant a decision. I let it go to voicemail. His message came through less than a minute later. Mom, you're overreacting. Harbor Ridge is helping someone in the family. I was going to explain everything when the time was right. Don't freeze anything. You could make this much worse. Someone in the family? Not me. I listened to the message twice. Then I heard the part he did not realize. He had said, he knew the payments existed. He knew exactly where the money had gone. And he was afraid I would stop them. That afternoon, I called the number for Harbor Ridge Recovery Center. A receptionist answered after the second ring. Harbor Ridge, this is Emily. How may I help you? My name is Rebecca Clark. I said, I need to know why money has been taken from my bank account. The receptionist asked for an account number. I told her I did not have one. Then she asked for my date of birth. When I gave it to her, I heard the clicking of keys. A pause. Then, another pause. I'm sorry, Mrs. Clark, she said. I'm not finding a patient under that name. I was told there are recurring payments from my account. May I place you on a brief hold? The music that played while I waited was cheerful and unbearable. When Emily returned, her voice had changed. Mrs. Clark, I can't discuss another adult's treatment information with you, but I can tell you that the payment method you mentioned is associated with a resident account. My fingers tightened around the phone. A resident? Yes. Is the resident my son? I'm sorry. I can't confirm that. Is the resident Daniel Clark? I'm sorry. Mrs. Clark. She did not say yes. She did not have to. I knew Daniel had been having trouble. Everyone knew he had been struggling after his delivery business failed. He had lost another job the previous year. He had grown distant from his girlfriend. Sophie had started spending more time with her mother. But Daniel had never told me he needed treatment. He had never asked for help. Instead, he had taken my debit card, changed my passwords, and made me feel guilty for buying peaches and patio chairs. I thought about the phrase he kept using. For your protection. I had heard it so many times that I almost believed it. But protection does not leave an older woman unable to buy her heart medication. Protection does not hide $1,100 in payments under a false explanation. Protection does not tell strangers that a mother is confused so they will stop listening to her. That evening, I went to the filing cabinet in William's workshop. It was an old gray metal cabinet with a lock that stuck when the weather turned humid. William had labeled the folders by hand: home, taxes, insurance, savings, vehicle, important. I opened important. Inside were our wills, the house deed, my pension information, and a letter William had written me before his final hospital stay. I had read it dozens of times. I did not open it that night. Instead, I looked for the document I remembered signing after he died. A durable power of attorney. Daniel had brought it to me after the funeral. He said it was sensible to have someone who could help if I were ever in the hospital. I had agreed. Because it seemed responsible. Because I trusted him. Because I did not understand that a document created for an emergency could become a tool in the hands of someone who wanted control before an emergency ever came. I read every page slowly. The document did give Daniel certain authority if I became unable to manage my affairs, but I had not been declared unable. There was no doctor's letter, no court order, No written finding of incapacity. And there, in plain language near the end, was the sentence that made my stomach turn. This power does not limit the principal's right to make decisions or control her own financial affairs while capable. I read it again. Then, I placed the paper in a folder, along with the pharmacy receipt, the bank notes I had written down, and the voicemail from Daniel that I had saved to my phone. By 9 o'clock, I had a plan. The next morning, I would go to the bank. I would ask for every transfer, every login change, every address update, and every document connected to my account. Then, I would speak to an attorney, not because I wanted to punish my son. Not yet. I wanted the truth. But before I could do any of that, someone knocked on my front door. I looked through the window beside it. Daniel stood on my porch, and beside him was my granddaughter, Sophie. She looked pale. In one hand, she held a canvas overnight bag. In the other, she held a sealed envelope with my name written across the front, in Daniel's handwriting. When I opened the door, Sophie looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Grandma," she whispered, "Dad says you're making a mistake." Then she handed me the envelope. "But I think you need to see what he's been hiding." I did not take the envelope from Sophie right away. Daniel stood behind her on my porch, with his shoulders squared, trying to look calm. But I knew my son well enough to see what he was hiding. His jaw was too tight. His eyes did not settle anywhere for more than a second. "Sophie," I said gently, "come inside." Daniel stepped forward. "Mom, this doesn't need to become a production." I looked at him. My medication was declined, because my account was being used without my permission. I think it became a production before I even knew there was a stage. "Dad said you don't understand," Sophie said, her voice trembling. "He said you were sick and scared, and that he was doing everything for you." Daniel snapped his head toward her. "Sophie." But she had spent too many years listening to adults explain things around her, without explaining anything to her. She held out the envelope again. "I found it in the glove box when Dad asked me to get his insurance card," she said. "I wasn't trying to snoop. It had your name on it." I took the envelope. Daniel exhaled sharply. "That's private." "So is my bank account?" I said. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Daniel tried a different voice. The wounded voice. The one that used to make me forget every question I had. "Mom, I needed help. I was going to tell you." "You had 4 months?" I was ashamed. "That explains why you hid it." I said. "It does not explain why you took my card. Why you changed my password? Why you made me unable to buy my medication?" His face crumpled for half a second. "I didn't know the prescription would get declined." "You knew you were taking money from an account that was not yours." "I was going to pay it back." "With what?" He looked away. That was my answer. Sophie came inside, and I closed the door behind her. Daniel stayed on the porch. He knocked once. Then he called through the door. "Mum, please, don't do this to me." I rested my hand against the wood. For years, I had believed that loving Daniel meant protecting him from every hard consequence. I had thought that if I gave him one more chance, one more loan, one more explanation for his behavior, eventually, he would become the man I knew he could be. But standing there, I understood something I wish I had learned earlier. Love without boundaries does not rescue a person from their worst choices. Sometimes it gives those choices room to grow. "I am not doing this to you," I said through the door. "You did this when you decided my money was yours to use." Then I walked back to the kitchen with Sophie. Inside the envelope was a payment agreement from Harbor Ridge Recovery Center. Daniel had entered their outpatient recovery program in February. The papers showed he had agreed to treatment for alcohol dependence and prescription drug misuse after an incident at work. There was also a separate page listing the person responsible for payment: Rebecca Clark. The signature was written in my name, but it was not mine. It resembled mine from a distance. The looping R, the slanted C, the way the last name trailed down slightly at the end. Still, I had spent 68 years signing my name. I knew when someone had tried to imitate it. Sophie sat across from me at the kitchen table while I read the documents. "Did you know he was in treatment?" I asked. She shook her head. "I knew he went somewhere on Tuesdays and Thursdays. He said it was job counseling." "Did he tell you why he used my account?" Her eyes filled with tears. "He told me you wanted to help him. He said you had a family plan now because you didn't like dealing with money anymore." I felt a cold ache in my chest. Not because Sophie had believed him, because he had used my granddaughter's love for me as part of the lie. "You are not in trouble," I told her. "You did the right thing bringing this to me." She nodded, but she did not look relieved. "Is Dad going to get arrested?" I took a breath. I don't know what will happen, but adults have to answer for what they do, even when they are hurting, even when they are family. Sophie looked down at her hands. "Can people get better?" "Yes," I said, "but they have to tell the truth first." The next morning, I went to the Willow Creek branch of my bank with the envelope, my power of attorney document, my identification, and a folder full of notes. Carla was there in person. She was younger than I expected, maybe in her early 30s, with dark hair pulled back and a navy blue blazer. She greeted me by name and led me to a private office. "Mrs. Clark," she said, "I'm glad you came in." I almost didn't, I admitted. A lot of people hesitate when the person involved is family. That sentence made me feel less foolish. Not less sad, but less foolish. Carla printed every relevant transaction from the previous 6 months. We went through them line by line. There were the 4 Harbor Ridge payments I already knew about. Then there were 2 smaller transfers to Daniel's utility company, a payment toward his car insurance, and a $300 cash withdrawal from an ATM near his apartment. All of it had happened after my online banking password was changed. All of it had been approved through the mobile application connected to my account. When I asked whether Daniel had used the power of attorney, Carla looked at the document in my folder and shook her head. "From what I can see, these weren't entered as authorized agent transactions," she said. "They were processed using your online access credentials." "So he used my password or access to your device and account." I thought of Daniel sitting at my counter 6 weeks earlier, telling me he was helping clear storage on my phone. He had not been organizing anything. He had been opening a door into my finances. Carla explained the next steps without rushing me. The bank would keep the transfers blocked. They would investigate the unauthorized activity. They could provide documentation for my attorney and, if necessary, law enforcement. Then she asked whether I wanted to revoke Daniel's power of attorney. I looked down at the document. I remembered signing it with Daniel beside me after William died. I remembered how tired I had been, how grateful I felt to have someone say, "I'll handle things, Mum." I had mistaken convenience for safety. "Yes," I said, "I want to revoke it today." Carla gave me the name of an elder law attorney in town, Margaret Holloway. Ms. Holloway had helped several library patrons over the years with estate questions, and I recognized the name immediately. Her office was above a florist shop on Main Street. The stairway smelled faintly of lilies. Her waiting room had a wooden bookshelf filled with legal guides and mystery novels, which made me like her before she even came out to greet me. Margaret Holloway was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. She listened without interrupting as I told her everything. The missing debit card, the prepaid card, the false family budget. the medication refusal, the changed password, the Harbor Ridge payments, the signature that was not mine. When I finished, she placed both hands flat on her desk. "Rebecca," she said, "you have done exactly what you should have done. You documented. You secured your accounts. You came in before the situation could become worse." I had expected an attorney to speak in legal terms. Instead, she sounded almost like a friend. "Did I wait too long?" I asked. "You responded when you recognized the pattern," she said. "That matters." She explained that the power of attorney could be revoked as long as I had capacity to make that decision, which I clearly did. She prepared the revocation documents, sent formal notice to Daniel, and advised me to give copies to my bank, doctor's office, and any institution that might have accepted the old document. Then, she studied the Harbor Ridge agreement. "This signature is concerning," she said. "And if the facility received payments from your account based on a false authorization, they may need to cooperate with the bank investigation." "Will Daniel lose his treatment?" "His treatment is a separate issue from his conduct," she said. "If he needs care, he needs to find a lawful way to pay for it. You may choose to help him someday, but help must be offered honestly. It cannot be taken." That was the first time anyone had said it so plainly. I could care about my son's recovery and still refuse to be used. Margaret sent a letter to Harbor Ridge that afternoon. It stated that I had not authorized payments, had not signed the agreement, and had no responsibility for Daniel's account. She included copies of my bank records and asked that the center preserve all payment and authorization documents for review. 3 days later, Harbor Ridge's compliance officer called me. Her name was Dr. Fro. Elena Moss. She did not share Daniel's private treatment details. She was careful about that. But she confirmed that the billing records listed me as the responsible party and that the signature page had been submitted electronically from an email address connected to Daniel. "He represented that you had agreed to pay," she said. "We are reviewing our internal process." "Did anyone call me to confirm?" There was a silence. Then she said, "No." And that should have happened. The center canceled all future charges immediately. They later returned the payments they could verify as unauthorized, though the bank's investigation took several weeks to complete. Daniel's reaction came faster. He left me 6 voicemails in one night. The first was angry. "You had no right to call them. You could have ruined everything." The second was pleading. "I was trying to get sober. Mom, isn't that what you wanted?" The third was cruel. "You always cared more about money than your own son." I listened to that one only once. Then came the last message. It was quieter. "I'm sorry. I didn't know how to tell you I needed help." That message hurt the most, because it was the first thing he had said that sounded true. But truth arriving late does not erase the damage done before it. Margaret advised me not to discuss the case with Daniel alone. The bank had referred the matter to its fraud department, and an investigator contacted me for a statement. I told the truth. I did not exaggerate. I did not call Daniel names. I explained that my son had taken my debit card without consent, accessed my online bank account, and directed money from it to his own treatment and personal bills. I explained that he had limited my access to my money and caused a medically necessary prescription to be declined. The investigator listened, asked questions, and collected the documents. I did not know then what final consequences Daniel would face. Investigations do not move as quickly as television makes them seem. There were forms, interviews, records, and decisions that belonged to people trained to make them, but I knew I had done something important. I had stopped protecting the lie. A month later, Daniel asked if he could meet me at Margaret Holloway's office. He was there when I arrived, sitting in the same kind of stiff chair I had sat in weeks earlier. He looked thinner, tired, not broken in a way that made me feel triumphant, broken in a way that made me remember he was still my child. Margaret stayed in the room at my request. Daniel looked at me for a long time before he spoke. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said. "That is good," I replied, "because forgiveness is not the first thing we are discussing." He nodded. "I'm still in treatment." "I'm glad. I'm paying for it now. I got a part-time job through the program. They helped me apply for assistance." "I'm glad you did that too." He swallowed. "I was scared. I didn't want Sophie to know. I didn't want you to look at me like I was a failure." I looked at him carefully. "Daniel, needing treatment did not make you a failure. Lying to me did not make you beyond hope. But taking my money, controlling my access to it, and telling people I was confused when I was not, that was a choice. 8. Several choices." Tears filled his eyes. "I know." "No," I said softly. "I think you are beginning to know." I gave him the boundaries Margaret and I had prepared. He would have no access to my bank accounts, cards, passwords, mail, phone, or legal documents. He would not enter my house without an invitation. He would not speak to doctors, banks, or businesses on my behalf. If he wanted contact with me, it would happen in public places at first, and only if he remained honest about his recovery and the investigation. He read every line. Then he signed an acknowledgement that he had received them. It was not dramatic. There was no shouting. No one slammed a door. That was part of what made it real. Justice did not arrive as revenge. It arrived as a clear line on a piece of paper, a locked bank account, a revoked document, and a mother finally willing to say no. The bank eventually restored the unauthorized funds that had remained under review. Harbor Ridge corrected its records and changed its verification policy for third-party payments. The investigation continued, and Daniel was required to cooperate through his attorney. I did not celebrate that. I went home and planted basil in the little pots on my kitchen windowsill. William had always kept herbs there, though he could never remember which one was which. He would sniff a leaf and guess wrong with complete confidence. Sophie came by that Saturday. We made peach cobbler together, not because it was cheap, not because it fit somebody else's budget, because peaches were in season, because the house smelled warm when they baked, and because I had every right to spend my own money on the small things that made my life feel like mine. Before she left, Sophie hugged me tightly. "Grandma," she said, "I'm proud of you." I held her for a long moment. Then I told her the truth. I wished every child, every parent, and every grandparent understood. You can love someone deeply, I said, and still refuse to let them harm you. That was the lesson Daniel's so-called family budget taught me. Independence is not selfishness. Asking questions is not betrayal. And dignity does not disappear just because someone you love tries to take control of your life. If Rebecca's story moved you, please subscribe, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to remember that their voice still matters. And tell me in the comments, where would you draw the line if a family member tried to control your money for your protection?